Good afternoon. It's Friday, August 31st, 2018. I'm David Menzies, and this is Ezra Levant's Battleground. Hey folks, great to have you with us. I'm David Menzies filling in for Ezra Levant, and because Ezra does the work of so many others here, I can't do this show alone. That's why there's another special co-host filling in with me today, and that would be the one and only Sheila Gunn Reid from Alberta. How you doing there, Sheila?
Hey, David, this is going to be fun. It's going to be like the Donnie and Marie show, but for conservatives.
You know, that brings up really bad memories of the 2 years I spent in Newfoundland in the mid-'70s. All I had, it was two TV channels. It was CBC and CTV. And because I was a mainlander, which meant I was a complete loser and had no friends, on Friday night at 10 o'clock, my choice was on CTV, the Donnie and Marie show, and on CBC, Tommy Hunter Country. Wow, was I ever waiting for the internet to be invented. I almost bought a CB radio, actually, to break the monotony. But Sheila, great to see you again. And now, so much in the news to talk about. I think first and foremost is this disgraceful Court of Appeal decision to, I think, not just put the kibosh on the Trans Mountain Kinder Morgan project, but maybe putting the kibosh on billions and billions of dollars of future investment, especially in the mining and oil and gas sector in Canada. Sheila, you're much closer to this story than I am, of course, being in Alberta. Are people going crazy in the Wildrose province right now?
Short answer, yes. You know, you and I were talking about this earlier. If this were the Quebec hydro industry that wasn't allowed to sell their hydro, or if this were the Ontario auto sector or Saskatchewan agriculture, there would be rumblings about separation. And that's what we're hearing here. We're seeing more and more people, reasonable people, who are looking at all of this and saying, what exactly is the point of Confederation when we're being treated like the country's change purse? The equalization payments never change, no matter how many pipelines don't get built. Alberta still pays a lot into equalization and doesn't get a lot back. And we don't have any help from the federal government to help us get our resources to Tidewater. David, it is crazy. It is absolutely crazy that, we're the world's third largest oil resource.
Yes.
The third largest. We can't get our oil to Tidewater. This would absolutely never happen anywhere else in the world except in Canada, when we're letting these foreign-funded radicals set the agenda and make these appeals to the appeal court that ultimately end up blocking our pipeline projects.
But Sheila, foreign-funded radicals, that's one thing. That's one kettle of fish. Mm-hmm. But the Court of Appeal decision here, I think this is judicial activism at its very worst. First of all, I absolutely don't buy their rationale for killing this project. First and foremost, not enough consultation with Aboriginal groups. The facts of the matter show that there were 9 months of discussions with Aboriginal groups. And by the way, some Aboriginal groups, as you well know, are pro-pipeline. I guess their opinion doesn't count. So is this what we're seeing here? Are these, social justice warrior judges on the Court of Appeal? Because I'll tell you, I think when you sit down with groups for 9 months and listen to them, how is that not consultation?
Well, and David, there were 4 rounds of consultation, 2 initial rounds before the Liberals took over and another 2 after the fact. And the word is consultation. The word is not permission. We have a duty to consult. We don't have a duty to seek permission from everybody who wants to weigh in on this pipeline project, because that's what Confederation is about. We're seeing Canada balkanize, and the feds aren't really doing anything about it.
I think you're onto something here, Sheila. It's almost as though the definition of consultation has been changed, which is to say that if a Native group says, here is our problem and this is why we want it stopped, and you say, I beg to differ, having a difference of opinion, in at least as far as I can interpret the judge's ruling, means that you didn't consult. In other words, because you didn't echo their opinion, their point of view, therefore there was no consultation, and that's perverse.
Well, and let's go back a little bit. The Northern Gateway Pipeline project was squashed by the court. That approval was squashed by the court in 2016. The Trudeau Liberals never decided to appeal that decision. They basically let the pipeline die. Rachel Notley in Alberta here was happy also to let the pipeline die because she said there was not adequate consultation with First Nations groups. That's what the court said at the time. So in 2 years, the Liberals had to do something to make that consultation process adequate. They didn't really. Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau, well, I don't know about Justin Trudeau, but Rachel Notley has come out and said that the Court of Appeals decision was wrong. So if it's wrong now, why was it right when it happened to Northern Gateway? It just seems like, they're offloading this political hot potato onto the court when neither one of them, Justin Trudeau nor Rachel Notley, none of them really want to see this pipeline get built, but at least they can say that they weren't responsible for the voice of no.
Yeah, they're now finding convenient boogeymen to point the finger to. And, the numbers are staggering. I mean, Sheila, in the last 5 quarters, I understand, foreign companies have withdrawn a net $8.2 billion from Canada's energy and mining sector, and that compares with the previous decade to those 5 quarters, an investment of some $130 billion. But I think all this decision does, Sheila, is reinforce to the rest of the world that this is a lousy place to make an investment in when it comes to energy development.
Yeah, we're seeing companies pull out of Alberta and they're going to far more safe places for investment like Iraq and Egypt. That's pretty telling. And let's not forget we have a pretty business-friendly administration right to the south of us. Let's take a look at the Dakota Access Pipeline project. Donald Trump literally signed a piece of paper and breathed life into that pipeline after ongoing protests that actually left environmental disasters behind them. And it was just so easy because there was political will to get that done. And companies, international companies, when they're looking at that, when you're looking at Canada and saying, you know what? The Dakotas have the exact same oil formation as southern Saskatchewan, but why would we invest in Saskatchewan when we can actually get something done in the United States?
Oh, I wouldn't put a dime into this country given the judicial environment right now based on this. But I guess the big question is, where does it go from here, Sheila?
It doesn't go anywhere. I mean, it's up to Justin Trudeau to appeal this decision to the Supreme Court. I haven't heard whether or not he's going to do that. That should have been the first thing out of his mouth yesterday. It wasn't. And Rachel Notley is talking tough, but she's actually doing absolutely nothing. And I think we have a clip that Mr. Producer put together for us. I just wanted to say Mr. Producer because I'm a huge Mark Levin fan and he always says Mr. Producer. And I've been waiting my whole life to say that. But I think Mr. Producer has a series of clips put together from Rachel Notley's press conference yesterday. And one intrepid reporter actually did an accidental piece of journalism and asked her a really good question. And I think you're going to be amazed with the response. Here.
The current state of affairs in Canada right now is such that building a pipeline to Tidewater is practically impossible. As a result, our ability to transport our most profitable commodity is subject to the whims of the White House and the U.S. government. Yet as important as climate action is to our province's future, I've also always said that taking the next step and signing on to the federal climate plan can't happen without the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And so, today, I'm announcing that with the Trans Mountain halted and the work on it halted, Until the federal government gets its act together, Alberta is pulling out of the federal climate plan.
Senator, is a fault you said to be withdrawing from the National Climate Plan. What does that look like? What would you actually be doing differently now than you were doing yesterday?
Well, you're quite right that the impact of our participation in the national plan comes into effect when the price goes up to $40. So right now, there wouldn't be an immediate impact, but it comes down to our government's role in terms of promoting the plan overall and their ability to count on us to be part of it.
What does this mean, Premier, to Alberta's carbon tax?
Our carbon tax as it sits right now, the Alberta Climate Leadership Plan stays in place. That was the Climate Leadership Plan was something we put in place before the federal government was elected, before we got into the conversation about Kinder Morgan or the Trans Mountain. But we've always been very clear that signing on to the Pan-Canadian Framework or the federal government's plan was conditional on the pipeline.
Well, it sounds to me, what's that saying again, Sheila? A day late and a pound short in terms of this issue. And it's funny, as we were running that clip, I got a response here from one of our viewers, Leonard Roth. And this is what he says: as the Republic of Western Canada, we would be one of the richest countries on the planet. Time for the rebel to get behind the separation movement. It raises the point, Sheila, if you were to, this is a completely hypothetical situation, but again, in the early 90s, who could have foreseen that there was going to be a referendum in Quebec again for separation in 1995? But if you were to put it to Western Canadians, how would you vote if it meant leaving Confederation, that the handcuffs of all this judicial and environmental and Aboriginal activism is off of us and we can develop our oil sands and get our product to market? Do you think that would be enough of a carrot to actually make the vote 50% plus one?
You know what, I'd like to think that I'm not a separatist. I'd like to think that I am pro-Canadian. And I think that I am. But there comes a time, and I think it's coming pretty soon, if it's not here yet, where normal people like me, who are very pro-Canadian, are looking around and saying, what in the heck am I doing here? If we became the 51st state, we could get pipelines built. There's no issue of any sort of cross-border nonsense. It can happen with a stroke of a pen from the president's office. There's none of this finagling and there's no patience for foreign-funded radicals and activist courts to put the kibosh on these nation-building projects. And, they truly are nation-building, but if they're not getting done, then what's the point of staying within a nation? Now, you rushed me past that clip from Notley because she says a heck of a lot of nothing in there. The first part, she takes a sideways swipe at Donald Trump. And that's stupid because I think Krista Freeland can attest to what happens when you take a sideways swipe at Donald Trump. The Keystone XL pipeline right now is probably the only pipeline that's ever going to get built under both current governments here in Alberta and federally. And it doesn't do anybody any favors to say the White House is the problem. The White House is not the problem. The White House are our friends. The problem is, these American activist group that are sort of interloping and funding Canadian activism on the ground. And then when Rachel Notley says that she's going to pull out of the federal government's climate plan, a reporter then asks her, well, what does that mean? And it literally means absolutely nothing because Alberta still has their carbon tax. It's going to go up when Rachel Notley says it's going to go up. And I really don't care whose face is on my carbon tax bill, whether it's Rachel Notley or Catherine McKenna's. I'm still paying a carbon tax. So all of this means nothing to me. I still have a carbon tax, but I have no pipeline. So what's the difference?
Well, all we can hope for, Sheila, I think, is that for this to go to the Supreme Court, again, talk about time is money. We're talking months, if not years, to get some kind of, final resolution on this. And by the way, since you mentioned the United States and Donald Trump, great segue into our second pressing topic of the day, especially with this being Deadline Friday, and the U.S. and Canada coming to a deal, maybe, hopefully, who knows. Now, let's be honest. This is a phony deadline. This is a deadline imposed by Donald Trump. And it's not as though it can be extended or not. But I have to say, from what I'm reading and what I'm hearing, Sheila, I'm not optimistic that a deal is going to be done either today or in the weeks ahead.
David, can I tell you why I'm not optimistic? Is because it's the Friday before a long weekend. So there's literally nobody in government working. Like, we're the only people working, David. Nobody in government works Friday before a long weekend. There's nobody there. So I think the writing is on the wall for the Canadians. We're playing catch up with the Mexicans who were like the target of Donald Trump's ire since he was campaigning. So for 2 years, even before he became the president, his target was the Mexicans. And somehow the Canadian administration is so stupid that they turned his focus like a laser beam onto us. And I'm not hopeful. I wish things were more optimistic, especially for Canada's auto sector. But I'm not sure that a deal that Canadians want is going to get done anytime soon.
And, Sheila, what was the deal a couple of days ago? I mean, what came to mind was that Blondie hit from the early 80s, Hanging on the Telephone, when Donald Trump tried to phone Justin Trudeau, and Trudeau wouldn't take Trump's call. I mean, does our Prime Minister have a little delusion in terms of who's the dog and who's the tail here?
First of all, I don't know that song because I'm not 75.
It's a great song.
But I'm sure it is, David. I'm sure it is. But it's Justin Trudeau. He's the king of the personal day. What is he do? What is he too busy doing? Was there like a mean hacky sack tournament out front that he was missing out on? Like, what is he doing that is more important than plucking the Canadian economy out of the fire? I mean, when you don't take calls from someone, it's either because you're scared, which, that's why I avoid phone calls from Ezra. And secondly, I'm kidding, he's the best boss in the world. Or that you don't have anything to say. Like, what could Trudeau say to Donald Trump that could fix this mess?
I don't know, and I'm kind of one, and I think the prickly thing too, the Americans are coming after supply management, Andrew Scheer's favorite little hobby horse, evidently. And I'm wondering if, in closed door negotiations, this is the big sticking point, and this is what we're going to, potentially sacrifice the Canadian economy by way of, for example, the Ontario auto industry, which, by the way, Sheila, if you were just to shut that down for a few days, would mean monumental damage to the economy. What's your take on this lack of a deal getting done?
Well, I think that it's probably contingent on all those SJW nonsense things that they put into the negotiations, like women's issues, what gender is the car coming off the manufacturing line in Oshawa? Like, it's so stupid. But a lot of this, I'm sure, hangs on supply management. And it's Donald Trump will ultimately be the one who kills supply management in Canada, whether Trudeau or Andrew Scheer likes it or not. And Andrew Scheer burned up a heck of a lot of political capital by supporting supply management. He alienated half the party. And even people who support supply management were thoroughly annoyed with Andrew Scheer that the discussion wasn't even allowed to take place. I mean, and for less than 1% of the economy, we're putting about 20% of it in jeopardy. And that's just the auto sector. That's not, any potential pipeline from Alberta that could be put on the shelf because we've annoyed the Americans.
Well, I'm just trying to think. There are indeed some chick cars out there, the Mazda Miata, the Volkswagen New Beetle, but I don't think they're made in Canada. So maybe that's part of the issue. We have to get more feminine automobiles into the Ontario auto sector.
David, you drive a feminine automobile.
Oh, how dare
David,
you?
No, you do. You drive one of those electronic emasculations of a car that you plug into a wall like a blow dryer. You drive one of those. You're part of the problem, David.
No, but my other car is a pickup truck, and I think I'm going to look for a bumper sticker that says that, and I'll put it on my Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid that you so detest. But didn't detest it that much that you didn't want to take a ride back to your hotel in Toronto when you were by for Rebel Live, back in June. But anyways, we digress.
I was drunk, David. I was drunk.
Oh boy! So and by the way, Sheila, again, since I mentioned Scheer, where do you think Scheer is going to stand on all this nonsense going on, especially with the pipeline issue and, of course, this trade agreement that might not come to fruition, especially since he, in a way, has painted himself into a corner because the only reason he is the Conservative Party leader, let's face it, and I mean, he wouldn't deny this, I don't think, given that he was drinking a carton of milk at his acceptance speech, is because of the dairy farmers lobby putting him there because of his commitment to supply management. Do you think this was a big misstep for him?
I absolutely think it was a big misstep. Now, Andrew Scheer's only options are this misplaced Trudeau support masquerading as patriotism and, support for the Canadian economy, when really the focus should be on how badly Trudeau has bungled this from the very beginning. When Donald Trump took office, he said he would absolutely be renegotiating NAFTA. The federal Conservatives should have been preparing for what that meant for them as far as their positions. And they've bungled this really, quite frankly, as badly as the Liberals have. Because really, right now, there's no difference between the two parties.
But, and I think you raise a good point here, Sheila, in terms of the bungling. Even before the Bernier mess of last week, I would put to you that with Justin Trudeau's almost 3 years of embarrassments and bungling and diplomatic faux pas, that Andrew Scheer or anyone that was ahead, that was leading the Conservative Party, should be ahead in the polls by at least 10 points, at least. And he wasn't. And this is, like I said, this is even before the Bernier controversy. What I'm saying, Sheila, is that I am not very confident going into the federal election a year next October with Mr. Scheer. And part of that is he doesn't seem to stand for anything. And I bring it back to what happened to you and Ezra when you went to the Conservative Party convention last weekend in Halifax. Just a week or so before that, Mr. Scheer made this impassioned speech about freedom of speech and how sometimes, when you hear things that are offensive that you don't like, well, that's no reason to shut down free speech. And he shut down you and Ezra from covering this convention as members of the media, whereas he had open arms for the likes of the CBC and all kinds of activist groups to pitch their tents inside the convention. What do you make of that since you were on the ground there in Halifax, Sheila?
That was funny because we got a bunch of different excuses from the Conservatives about why we couldn't come. At first, it was because Ezra sent some sort of email in 2017 that they were rescinding our invite. Like it was some sort of news flash that that we've been critical of the Conservatives in the past. But then they told the Globe and Mail that they don't allow activist groups into the convention.
Yeah.
It's a conservative activist conference. like, do the people from Campaign Life Coalition know that they don't allow activists in? Like, literally, everybody's an activist. And there are training sessions about how best to be an activist. So even if we are an activist group, which I think, depending on the day, I would concede that point 50%. We're still journalists, but we do a little activism too. Why is that a reason not to allow us in at an activist convention? But they allowed Bob Fife in, who takes voyeuristic photos of me exchanging pleasantries with a coworker from across the street. I mean, that article that was in the Globe and Mail that I said hi to Hamish Marshall, it was several hundred words. explaining that I'm a nice person and that I don't hold a grudge, which I guess should be a lesson for Andrew Scheer that maybe he shouldn't hold a grudge against me because he and I part ways on supply management. It was so weird. And if the Conservatives thought that keeping us out of the convention would stop stupid articles like that, trying to link us officially with the Conservatives, it didn't. It actually became everything everybody was talking about, including us. The delegates came to us and said, like, I had people saying, you know what, I don't agree with your stance on supply management, but I think you should be here. And that was overwhelming. I didn't get a single person come up to me and say, yeah, I'm sort of glad they gave you the boot here. Like, that didn't happen at all.
And you know, Sheila, talk about not knowing your audience. I mean, as you know, and as probably most of our viewers know, we have surpassed the 1 million mark in terms of YouTube subscribers. And these are people, I would assume most of them are being right of center, who don't like the Trudeau regime, are actually cheering for regime change, want maybe a Conservative government in power. And the way I see it is Scheer is just giving all of our viewers the middle finger too.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We have 1 million pairs of eyeballs, a lot of votes they want to court.
Yeah.
And when they exclude us, they're basically turning their backs on those votes. And if I were Andrew Scheer right now, there's not a single Conservative that I would want to alienate. Clearly, that's not the case. So what went down at the convention with that supply management vote and the leaked dairy cartel briefing document, it's pretty clear that instead of now that the Band-Aid's ripped off in the party, now that Bernier's gone, instead of saying, okay, let's have these discussions, let's solve these problems, let's make sure the Bernier people stay within the party, Scheer did the opposite. And you know, he's just alienating supporters and voters all over the place. The thing is, Conservatives, I generally think, are far more principled than Liberals in that we don't blindly follow our leader.
Yep.
And we'll call out our leader when he's doing something wrong. And I think Scheer is taking that very basic trait of the average Conservative for granted.
And you know, I think you're onto something here too, Sheila, that I think the role of you and I and Ezra and everybody else at the Rebel, if we are free-minded individuals, and I think we all are, is to be kind of like that umpire behind home plate. We call them as we see them. Just like in the provincial election, I took some flack for coming out criticizing Doug Ford for throwing Tanya Granick-Allen under the bus, because Tanya Granick-Allen is the reason why Doug Ford was the PC party leader in Ontario and then the premier. Without her and her supporters, it would have been Christine Elliott. And I just can't stomach that kind of disloyalty. Now, that's not to say I'm condemning Ford as the premier and as the regime, but on that issue, I had to take a stand. And as much as I would love to support the Conservative Party of Canada, I'm looking at this leader and, what do they say in Alabama? This dog don't hunt.
Do they say that in Alabama? I've never been there.
Somebody who once went to Alabama told me they say that. Is it Alabama or is it Arkansas? But you know what I'm saying, Sheila. And I mean, I gave you the example that we just talked about, how he made this impassioned plea for free speech and then he bans the Rebel. And I remember a few months earlier, he was talking about tying university funding to free speech issues, that if they have a clampdown on free speech. And then, lo and behold, along comes the Lindsay Shepherd affair. And Andrew Scheer, I'm just paraphrasing here, so don't quote me on this, but he was basically saying, well, it's an internal university matter and, they're going to work out something. Are you kidding me? It was the internal university people that went after this woman in the first place. So I'm just not, as Clara Peller used to say in the Wendy's ads, Sheila, where's the beef?
You and your obscure pop culture references. David, honestly.
If you got to know me, Sheila, you will find out that I am
I know you, David.
a vast reservoir of completely useless, trivial information, but I'm still going to spout it wherever I can. Moving on, what do you think? Scheer, I know Ezra has said that over the next year and a bit, our job maybe at the Rebel is to bring Scheer more over to being a true conservative, more right of center. Is it possible that we have enough time to fix Humpty Dumpty, or are we already looking ahead for 2023? Maybe that's when things are going to change.
I was giving some thought to this yesterday, and I think we have a really good example of this in BC. Andrew Weaver, the Green Party leader, actually holds the balance of power, because for the NDP to maintain their government, they need the support of Andrew Weaver of the Green Party. So if and basically, he sets the agenda now for the entire NDP party because they need him to keep the coalition together. So, is that something that Bernier is looking to do? If you can't force the Conservatives to the right from the inside, do you go outside and be a kingmaker and maybe hold the balance of power in a more minority government? I don't know if he has that kind of support yet, but the election is, a year and a bit off.
I just wonder, first of all, if Bernier will even have a candidate in every riding, A, and B, I wonder about the caliber of those candidates, and also, Sheila, typically, in politics, a startup protest party, it typically goes nowhere. So that's my fear. But maybe you're right. I also think that. I think Bernier made a strategic error by resigning. Maybe he could have been more effective in enacting change within the party. What do you think about that?
I agree with Bernier's assessment of the party, especially after having gone to that convention.
Yes.
I do disagree with his conclusions. Yeah. I disagree with his resolutions to the problem. And I'll tell you why. Because in Alberta, we wandered in the wilderness as Conservatives for 10 years. We let the Redford Tories run rampant because we took our ball and we went over to the Wild Rose Party. And because of that, then we had a vote split on the right, which allowed the NDP to come up the middle. And now I'm living through the tyranny of Rachel Notley. So I know the damage that a vote split can do. And I know the way that it can create these incredible unlikelihoods that we never would have thought could happen here in Alberta. So, I'm like you. I don't disagree with anything Bernier says about the party. I just wish that he had stayed in there, was grinding it out for change. And if Scheer had to get rid of him, then let Scheer be the bad guy.
Yeah, I agree. And so far, unfortunately, Scheer is being the bad guy. Now, I've enjoyed our discussion so much with you, Sheila. I had hardly any chance to look at some of the viewers and what some of their chats have been. Are you getting the viewer chats on your side?
I am, and that sort of means that you want me to read them because I've seen you. The reason I'm here, David, is because I've seen you try to read these, and it is like, I love my mother-in-law to death, but when I'm watching her try to scroll through her Facebook feed on her phone, and she is squinting, and she's not reading anything. She wants to read stuff, but she can't see it. That's you. And I think for my sake and for the viewer's sake, I'm going to do this.
Well, folks, I have to confess, I'm a big enough man to admit this. Some people say, why is Battleground not a daily anymore? Why is it a weekly? The fact of the matter is, according to Mr. Producer number 1, number 2, when I co-hosted those 4 days in a row, I killed Battleground. I killed it, yes. Battleground fell in battle to me, and it became a weekly. And please, geez, I'm trying to make the weekly a success. I don't want to be the guy known as killing the weekly battleground too. So Sheila is right. So when it comes to the technical aspects, I'm going to let the lady take over the show and read some of the more notable messages. There you go, Sheila.
Okay, so Patrick Max has a comment for me. He put it all in capitals, so I know that he means it. He would like for me to develop a tan. And no, because I don't want to look like an old rawhide chew toy when I'm 45. I don't want to look like a pig's ear. So I'm not going to get a tan. Sorry.
But you know what, Sheila? If you are going to get a tan, go all in. Become the next tan mom. Remember that? She's now a whack packer on the Howard Stern show. This is a woman. If you're unfamiliar, folks, of who tan mom is, Google the words tan mom, and basically she has overdone tanning to an extent that her face basically looks like a catcher's mitt now. But this is her ticket to ride. This is her notoriety. So please, Sheila, if you are going to tan your lovely skin, go all in. Go super dark.
Hey, we have a super chat. A super chat. Yes. It's from Fraser McBurney. I love when the people use the real names and not those crazy internet names. Anyway, it says, fact with Chipmunk Shear leading the Conservatives, they have a snowball's chance in hell of winning the next election. I'm inclined to believe with you, Fraser. He's not motivating anybody to race to the polls to support him now, is he?
You know, when he says Chipmunk Shear, I wonder if that'll stick. And here's the thing, Sheila, once a politician in power or one who's aspiring to power starts to acquire a negative or a comical nickname, in my books, it's over. For example, Paul Martin, he became known when he was Prime Minister as Mr. Dithers because he could never make a firm decision. I'll never forget, it was in December. He was coming out of a store. He had a Christmas wreath, and a reporter playfully asked him, Mr. Martin, is that a Christmas wreath or a holiday wreath? And he looked at the camera like Bambi staring a Hummer with its high beams on, and came up with the answer, it's a $50 wreath. I mean, he couldn't even answer that question. And likewise, the nickname I see people using with Andrew Scheer is Mr. Charisma. It's facetious, of course, right? But, once people are calling you Mr. Charisma in a sarcastic and sardonic way, that's not good.
Yeah, he's a milkmaid, and I think we should try to make that one stick to him. Another good nickname, and I didn't even intend for it to turn into a nickname, was Climate Barbie. And I didn't really. I sort of said it offhand. We were hosting a Canadian premiere for Mark Morano's movie Climate Hustle. And we were in Edmonton, and we were sort of revealing the fact that I was going to go to the UN climate change conference. And I said that I was going to go there to hold Climate Barbie to account. And everybody laughed. And then it just sort of stuck because it is so accurate. And the more she talks, the more she is Climate Barbie.
Well, and it's funny, a good segue into another story that's really going viral. It's certainly the talk of the town in Toronto. From little Barbie dolls to real-life giant Barbie dolls. What was in the news recently, Sheila, if you can imagine? Next week, there was supposed to be a so-called brothel opening in the Young Shepherd area of Toronto, North Toronto, that is. And basically what the difference is, folks, is that you wouldn't meet a real live female prostitute, but you would have a doll made out of 100% silicone. And I think I got the rate chart here, $80 for a half hour, $120 for an hour if you want two, a duo, that's $240. And people were just going crazy, but what the way this story has developed. First of all, Sheila, there was a funny quote by the local councillor John Fillion, who was saying that many parents were coming up to him and saying, "We're trying to explain this to our kids," to which I had to say, explain it to me, right? I mean, what kind of a man is going to a strip plaza, going into a room for half an hour, paying $80, and being with a doll? And I just, there's so many angles to take this as, but I wonder, Sheila, it comes down to this. Is this maybe a good thing for those men who are completely socially awkward? They can't form a relationship with a real woman or another person? Or is there maybe a dark side to this, that maybe these are people that have deviant behavior, like they like to get physically violent, which of course would be illegal with a real woman, but with a doll, you can slap it around. What's your take on this?
Well, first off, this is why the aliens won't visit us. Second off, what do you mean? Could there maybe be a dark side to this? This is all dark. All dark. This is darkness. These, like you say, like maybe this is for people who don't have social skills. Well, this is stopping them from developing marketable social skills to the opposite sex. Like if you're bad at talking to girls and you don't have a lot of charisma, maybe you just like to drink milk and talk about supply management. You're not learning anything. Like the only way you learn to be good at talking to girls is get out there and talk to them. And if they turn you down because you're weird, maybe you'll be a little less weird next time. But this actually stops people from developing social skills. And this is the natural progression from people who, this is a society that we communicate to each other over our phones and over our computers. And I'm saying this as I'm literally communicating to all of our viewers across the computer. But, we don't have a lot of human interaction anymore, or less than what we used to. So we don't have those social skills. So instead of developing them, we take the easy way out and we go do gross things to a piece of plastic. But it's terrible.
Sheila, the question arises, though, should this be illegal? And I think right now, with the laws of the land, this is not illegal. In fact, prostitution in Canada is not illegal. It's the act of solicitation, as I understand it. So Canada's got a real goofy prostitution law to begin with. It's like you're allowed to be a little bit pregnant by the sounds of it. But I mean, the reason why this doll brothel will not be opening next week in the Young Shepherd area is that the authorities found a way in decades-old zoning bylaws to not allow it. So in other words, I don't think they're allowed to be in a residential retail area, but they could open up in an industrial area. Even so, where would you stand on this, in terms of putting on your libertarian hat? If this is something people want to do, spend their money and spend some time in the darkness with a silicone doll, so be it? Or do you think there's some rationale here for the state to step in?
No, I mean, if these dolls look like adults, then yeah, I got to put on my libertarian hat and say it's sort of none of my business. It's not something I agree with. It's not something that I don't want to even know a person who would participate in this. I don't, and if I'll cut them right out of my life, like with a knife. But I don't think it's the government's business. And you and I were talking about this off camera. You said this came from Japan, which explains a lot because, Japanese viewers, don't write in because you guys know that you have a weirdness about sexuality, and writing me angry letters is not going to change that. I was reading like an article in the Independent that says like young Japanese people are basically asexual. They're not into it at all. Like they don't have that like hormonally driven virility that Western young people have. It's dead. Nothing's happening. And they sort of like it that way. And so I suppose this was an outlet for them in Japan. But I would hate the idea that this is going to come here and change how young men and young women interact with each other. But Sheila, I'm going to interrupt you because I just had a thought and I'm going to forget it because you're going to talk about something science fiction-y. I know it. Maybe part of this stems from the fact that young men are sort of scared to interact with young women because of this ongoing cry about rape culture, that like any awkward male heterosexual interaction is harassment or, abuse. And it's just not that way. So maybe this is like protecting it.
I never thought of that. There's no way a 120-pound doll made out of pure silicone is going to have a Me Too moment because it's an inanimate object. But you said something very interesting earlier, Sheila, when you began your answer. As long as the doll looks like a adult human being, as opposed to, I assume, a child. But when and I'm not trying to get too creepy here, and it does creep me out, but you could make the point that if it's an inanimate object, it's not living, it's not a human being. Does it matter at all what that thing looks like?
Yes. Yes, actually, I think there's some sort of level of necrophilia in all of this that it's just laying there, smells better than a dead body, but reacts the same way. I think this is all just weird. But we have a super chat.
Oh, fantastic.
This is a super chat. I'm going to take a screenshot of this and send it to the boss because we deserve kudos for this. It says, it's from Pete Henderson. He's given us almost $10 Canadian, I suppose. And he says, you two are good. I will subscribe to the Rebel Premium. We got one, David.
Fantastic. Did you say Pete Henderson or Paul Henderson?
Pete Henderson.
Oh, okay, then.
Don't be a nerd.
Well, as long as you're a Henderson. See, Hendersons are gold because, it was Paul Henderson that scored the winning goal at the Summit Series in 1972, as you know, Sheila, and Pete Henderson giving us these kudos. The Hendersons, top notch. Love them. And by the way, I'll tell you, I think this is, before we put to bed, no pun intended, the Aura Dolls story, I think the most disturbing thing was the official statement that came from the doll brothel, which is this, and I'll read it verbatim to you, Sheila. The dolls are thoroughly sanitized to meet your expectations. We take extreme measures when it comes to the safety of our clients. The use of condoms are highly recommended. Anyways, I don't know where to go with that. I just wonder who's got the job of sanitizing the dolls after these visits.
David, I'm dry heaving. I'm dry heaving. You have to stop.
I have that effect on so many women. You'd be surprised. Right. But so anyways, we will keep an eye on this story because we'll see.
No, we won't. We won't. You can. We won't.
Well, Mr. Producer number 2 is also nodding his head negatively through the window. We are not going to, and Mr. Producer number 1 by the looks of it. So I think it's a consensus. Folks, we will drop this story, even if they relocate in an industrial park somewhere in Markham or Woodbridge. We are not going to talk more about this Aura doll story because obviously it's creeping too many reasonable-minded people out. So there you go. Do you have some other chats that you'd like to read, Sheila?
Let's see. Okay, people are, let's see. Well, yeah, people are concerned that we got off on a bit of a side road there. Oh boy, David Rogers says introducing the new Sheila doll. Well, the Sheila doll would feed the chickens and yell at her kids in Costco.
You know what?
It's not as...
I bet you we'd sell a lot of Sheila dolls. I did a commentary a month ago. No, not guys, not that kind of doll. I mean, like the toy doll, right? Like the Justin Trudeau doll I talked about. Not that kind of doll. I'm saying, Sheila.
Like a bobblehead where I nod disapprovingly at you every time you open your mouth.
Exactly, like
a bobblehead.
We have the Ezra bobblehead. We have from the Bradford Exchange the Justin Trudeau 38 centimeter tall doll that I did, which talks actually. It has a collection of his quotes. The lamest quotes you could ever imagine, so that kind of doll. I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. We are not going to make a 120-pound silicone doll in the form of Sheila Gunn Reid ever. And I said it. Okay, carry on, Sheila. Do I still have a job here?
No. And you don't have a friendship with me either. We're done.
So Sheila, did you say you have another chat there?
Sure. Let's get another chat.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, here's one to make up for things from Milo McDonald. Sheila looking gorgeous. There you go. Does that put me in your good books again, Sheila?
Well, Amanda Joy's got a heck of an idea for me, and I'm crafty, so this is sort of right up my alley. I'm a crafter and a sewer. So it says, how about a voodoo doll of David so you can stick pins in him? David, if your back is sore later, I got out the sewing machine.
Well, you know what? I guess I have to. What do I have to cut off a lock of my hair and send it to you? You need something from the actual human to make a real voodoo doll. Is there any experts on voodoo dolls that could weigh in and give Sheila some direction to make a voodoo doll out of me and see if it works? Oh, and by the way, folks, if you think I'm creepy, Sheila opened up to me on the Israel trip that the Rebel conducted last month. And I'll tell you, she admitted to me she was hand knitting, and this is a great skill, hand knitting, was it toques, Sheila, for the brony community?
Yeah, because the bronies will pay.
And the bronies, folks, in case that's a new term for you, these are predominantly adult males that are fans of a cartoon targeted at the 3 to 6 girl demographic called My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And they actually have an annual convention every year in Baltimore. They had, I think, 12,000 people earlier this month attend. So Sheila is part of that community, shall we say?
I'm not, David!
And is profiting from it.
I profited from it, but I'm not currently profiting from it. Yes, I crochet. I crochet very well. Actually, I'm one of those traditional women who is really good at the domestic skills. And I was approached by someone in the brony community, and they said, hey, can you make me this? And I can. So I did. And then I became the exclusive brony hat supplier to the greater Edmonton area, which is an interesting story that I didn't want you to tell anybody.
Well, now that the cat's out of the bag, what are the bronies like, Sheila?
You know what? I couldn't pick one out of a crowd. Like, that's the weird thing. They seem pretty normal. They're just like bronies after dark.
Are there?
They could be you. It could be you.
It's definitely not me. I would love to hear people, if there are any bronies watching, to give us a few lines, tell us what the community is all about. You see, here's the thing, Sheila. To me, this is so bizarre, so disturbing that there are adult males that are into this little girl cartoon to the point that they're buying thousands of dollars worth of merchandise and going to annual conventions. That people say to me, Menzoid, you talk a lot of, what about the bronies. Have you ever actually watched My Little Pony? And Sheila, the answer is no. And I'll tell you why the answer is no. It's not that I'm too lazy to do research. It's just that I'm scared to death I might like it and become a brony too. So that's why I've never seen My Little Pony Friendship is Magic.
Yeah, but it's really not that far off for you, David. Like, you like all these weird pop culture things. And I'm not even going to say they're pop culture because they're really not from, like, this century. Like, every time I send you an email, it's always some weird science fiction or comic book reference that no normal person will understand. You're a brony waiting for a place to happen. You just don't like purple, I don't think.
No, it's just that, I guess I see things with this other sense. I mean, Lady Menzoid bought a Mitsubishi, and I couldn't help but notice that the logo for Mitsubishi Motors looks almost identical to the insignia of the Klingon Empire. So I bought her a little keychain with the Klingon Empire insignia on it. And I think that was a very sweet thing for me to do. And I asked you to Google the Mitsubishi logo and the Klingon insignia, and I don't think you ever bothered to do so, did you?
No, because I didn't have time to Google the Klingon Empire symbol because I was too busy saying a rosary for your wife because that woman is a saint. I love her. She's a saint. She really took one for the team when she took you off the market.
Well, we'll have to pass that on. Now, Sheila, I see that it's the 2-minute warning, as they would say in the NFL in the fourth quarter. So do you want to throw a few? I think we got a super chat if you want to throw it out there.
Sure. It's from Chris IT86, and I think I know him from Twitter. He's a great guy. Big fan of at least me. I don't know about you, David. But he says, vote Faith Goldie for mayor. Faith, I wish her nothing but the best. And, I have great affection for Faith, and I hope that everything in her life becomes exactly what she wants it.
And by the way, I should mention, Sheila, that Faith was in the news actually a day or two ago. She was canvassing in Toronto, and I think all the hardcore Faith haters were really trying to make this a much bigger story than it actually was.
Yeah.
There were some members of the Toronto police that posed for pictures with Faith, and people were screaming, "Oh, these cops should be reprimanded. They should be suspended." The fact of the matter is that people, when you're out in public, when you're running for office, and this applies to all politicians of all political stripes, when you're in a crowd, you never know who it is that comes out of a crowd, stands beside you, and a picture is taken. So I just thought this was a really unnecessary smear job by, her hardcore haters. I'll say that.
Well, you know what, David, I got to tell you, I think we redeemed ourselves, or not we, but you redeemed yourselves when you brought in the ringer here to save the show, because Happy Infidel Fox says David and Sheila have great chemistry. And, Amanda Joyce says, sorry, go ahead.
I want to thank him for that. In fact, that's inspired me in the spirit of bronyism to write my own screenplay for an animated series, and it will be called this, My Little Sheila, Friendship is Magic. What do you think about that?
Oh, my Lord. You know what?
Mr. Producer just yelled in my ear, time's up.
Cut. We're done.
Okay. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. We talked about all kinds of things, the Kinder Morgan and supply management and the Conservative Party of Canada and the Aura dolls and the brony community. And listen, it's the last day of August. Unofficially, summer ends on Tuesday. So listen, I hope all of you go out and have a really fun, safe time on this Labor Day weekend. And last word over to Sheila Gunn Reid, who did a fantastic job as co-host today. What do you say, Sheila?
I want to wish all the farmers out there a very happy, fruitful harvest. And remember, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great weekend.